See, I'm one of these people who is a pathological mover, and I am pretty much mentally incapable of speaking whilst standing in one place. So this is embarrassingly the first time I've actually heard Kyle present. And I'm impressed. Thank you for that. That was well put together and very helpful. And speaking of senior lecturer Dr. Kyle Keane, he made a comment earlier that he happily identifies as a blind person. And I'm not going to tell this story for him, but I will say that this happy identification with blindness was not always the case. It was extraordinarily hard. And I went through a little bit of that myself because I was not always a Keane user. I was an avid echolocation user and used echolocation as my primary means of getting around until I just got tired of, tripping over things. And eventually took up the use of a cane and now regard it more or less as a vision prosthetic. I can do anything. I can go anywhere with this high-tech cane. And I say high-tech because it's made of a blend of carbon fiber and Kevlar. So maybe it could double as a bulletproof barrier, should that ever become a need. I've hiked the Swiss Alps with it. I've hiked the Scottish Highlands with it. I've traveled, Calcutta with it, which is probably the hardest thing. So with the right kind of cane and the right kind of skills, you can do pretty much anything. But the point I want to make with regard to happily identifying as blind is the difficulty in doing so. Because many of us regard blindness as just super difficult, really, really hard. Like, darn near impossible, if not impossible, and pretty much unthinkable. And, but the reality is that the greatest challenge befalling blind people is not the actual physical limitations of blindness, far from it. It's the social barriers against blindness. That's the hardest aspect of being blind. And I don't just speak, as a blind person for blind people. I've worked with literally thousands of blind people. And this is a running theme throughout my encounters with blind people from all over the world. I've been to over 40 countries working with blind people. So I want to point that out because that's one of the takeaways that I want us to consider from this encounter with each other, is that when we look at how to make blindness easier, more palatable, if you will, or less unpalatable, however we regard it, it has a lot to do with, there's some physical challenges associated with blindness, but for the most part, it's really about the social challenges with regard to blindness. So, that said, yes, the talk is about self-determination, and I'd like to actually start out with a video. Would that we could all have a Florian in our lives to help with computer issues. There are a few videos I'm going to show during this presentation, and the first one is actually called Feature and Scene Analysis. It is a video about echolocation. This talk will not be about echolocation primarily, but it will be about self-determination, which of course includes echolocation as a sub-factor, because echolocation is just so gosh darn cool in terms of really strongly supporting and facilitating self-guided navigation. And this video is just going to show you some examples of how echolocation is used to help expand and increase our situational awareness. Basically, what's going on around us and how can we interact more effectively with what's going on around us. I will say that none of the 4 videos I'm going to be playing for you are audio described. I realize that audio description is such a huge thing here in the UK. It is much less so in the US. But the main reason I haven't audio described these videos is A, it's costly, and these were all put together by my own NGO. And B, I did cut these videos together in such a way that they are primarily dialogue driven, and I believe if you maintain concentration on the video, you can quite easily discern what's going on in these videos. So why don't we start with feature and scene analysis. The fence has disappeared momentarily. There's an entrance there and a passageway between the buildings. The fence returns here, and it actually looks like it curves away. Big open area, but we're approaching a structure.
He calls this flash sonar. Flash sonar has become Kish's primary means of navigation.
So in my case, it wasn't something I was really aware of. It just happened as a consequence of my childhood experiences.
The roof structure we're under isn't totally solid somehow. It's got openings in it, as if it were slatted or...
I describe them as fuzzy geometry, moving, dynamic figures. They have depth and contour and character.
We asked him to draw a picture, to recreate from memory the image he got from nothing more than the sound of clicks.
I'll just do a little dashed line here.
And remember, he had never set foot in his pavilion before today.
Should I say ta-da? Ta-da!
The accuracy of the image is uncanny.
It shows that there's an actual imaging process taking place. You're using sound instead of light to create a picture. Well, I was right about the roof.
19-year-old Justin Luchar is navigating his way through over a mile of Colorado wilderness, using only his powers of echolocation.
When I make a small tongue click, I can see placement, I can see edges, size, shape, texture, material density. Over here I see a tree. Now I see a wall here, it's a rock wall, and it comes up and there's a building over here. I know the building because of the size and the density, the shape.
How do you know there's a tree there?
Let's say you click at the trunk of the tree. It's going to hit the trunk. It's going to start to wrap around. It's going to wash up. When it comes back to you, it's going to shake, and it'll be the bark of the tree. As it goes up, you're going to see it actually wash into the branches, and you get this sort of sound waterfall effect.
Justin has now reached the dense forest section of the course, where he will have to navigate without touching any trees. It's taken Justin less than 30 minutes to walk over a mile through an incredibly testing environment, using only the power of sound.
What are you seeing?
Well, so I know that there's an object, and I know that this is a really solid object with divots in it. And I know that because when the sound comes back, it comes back very clearly and it shakes. And I know that it's harder than wood. So I'm going to bet that this is a rock, and...
Oh, he got it!
In this artist studio, he's going to use echolocation to describe an object, a sculpture by a local artist. Melissa, who won't be able to see the statue, will draw only what Brian is able to describe.
I somehow think that they might see more than we do in a certain way, and I'm kind of curious as to the depth of what they see.
It's time to get started.
Ta-da!
Brian makes his first pass at the sculpture, sending out wave after wave of sound to try to make out the shape.
As I'm clicking on it, I first start really trying to find the edges. It's about 5 feet tall. I'd say it's about my shoulder width wide. The whole thing is wavy, and it's irregular in its waviness.
Does it remind you of anything?
Like if a person was raising one hand in the air and had the other one sort of down. The hardest part about this process is really trying to verbalize the subtle information of the echo. So you have the base, and then you have this narrow little section, and then about 2 feet up, it goes wide.
The information he's giving me is really similar to that of someone with sight. If I didn't know any better, I would have no idea that he was blind. Oh my God, my drawing suddenly looks like a Thanksgiving turkey. The craziest part was when I just finished and he just drew like the outline exactly what I had just drawn. Really?
Is it close to what you had?
Whoa. It looks pretty good to me. I didn't even know I had done anything that was remotely close to what he was looking at. Right there was pretty shocking.
Now Melissa gets to see for herself what she's been drawing for the past hour.
Wow. I think we came pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense to me. Comparing it to when I touched it to what it sounded like, it made sense.
Waves and up again.
Oh, interesting. That's cool. The payoff was very satisfying.
So, whoever thought any of that was possible just by clicking your tongue at your surroundings? Not most people. In fact, it's very difficult to get taught these skills. They're not that difficult to learn. They're not even that difficult to teach. But it's quite difficult for blind people to actually find people to teach these skills. And the reason is largely because the professions around blindness have historically been dominated by sighted people. You got sighted people teaching blind people how to be blind, and they're, useful in some regards and completely missing the boat in others. And in the echolocation arena, and I would argue the self-determination arena, we're kind of missing that boat. So let me talk a little bit about self-determination. I'm going to whip through it. It deserves its own, day-long workshop. I'm doing my PhD now in self-determination as a neural anthropologist, and I'm just simply going to say this. I'm going to say that the theoretical elements of self-determination I'm studying are 6. They are security. How safe do we feel? How secure are we? And how secure are other people in us or about us? So how secure do they feel about who we are and what we do as blind people? Efficacy, so efficiency and effectiveness. Competencies. Equality, so how equitable are we considered to others? Identity, what is our sense of belonging? With whom do we feel we belong? Do we feel included? Indeed, are we included? Often, the institutionalization around blindness is quite exclusionary. It's quite isolating. It's quite marginalizing, and it's institutionalized deeply in our schools, in our workplaces, and indeed in policies, social policies surrounding blindness. Up until 1995 or 6, a blind person could not become an orientation and mobility specialist because there were just exclusionary practices. If you couldn't see, you couldn't teach. That is only just slowly changing now, 30 years later. Negotiability. So how effectively do we negotiate our environments? How effectively do we navigate our way through life? How do we negotiate life? How do we negotiate other people? How do we negotiate our physical environment? And gracefulness. Okay, gracefulness has to do with the kind of dignity, the kind of confidence with which we comport ourselves, with which we conduct ourselves. And it also has an aspect of belonging in the sense of fitting in, but fitting in while maintaining one's own self-identity. So pretty abstract concepts, but let me make them more concrete, because there are pillars of strategies, if you will, or sets of strategies that I believe underpin one's achievement of self-determination, and also affects how self-determination is maybe fostered, but also impeded. So what institutional practices, what social practices, what cultural practices might actually impede a blind person, or indeed any person with diversity, from achieving self-determination. And I call it, and by the way, there's an acronym to security, efficacy, equality, identity, negotiability, and gracefulness. The acronym is SEEING. We like acronyms. There's another acronym, ACTS, the ACTS framework. ACTS, A-C-T-S. Adaptations, capacity, technology, and support. Adaptations. What kinds of environmental adaptations can we put into place that might make things easier, not just for a blind person, but for lots of people? If you walk through transit stations in many parts of England and other parts of the world, outside the US, you'll see, I affectionately call them blind lines. They're guidelines on the floor that might help a blind person to find their way through an open space or through a crowded station. Many of the street crossings here in the UK have audible signals. You press the button, it goes beep, 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 beep when it's time to cross, or a little coney thingy that turns and rotates underneath the apparatus. Those are just two examples of adaptations. Braille signage would be another example of adaptation. So how effectively do we use adaptations, and indeed, how adaptable are we to dealing with challenges and changes throughout the environment? Because the environment isn't static, it's dynamic. So how adaptable are we to the dynamics of the environment? Capacity building. So an example of capacity building is echolocation. It's our skills, it's our health, it's our mental health, our fortitude, our robustness. It's how well do we hear. It's whatever is our remaining vision. It's basically our capabilities or capacities as people. I'd like to actually play another video. This is the visual cortex video, and it kind of shows you, again, it's a bit about echolocation, but it highlights the neural plasticity behind capacity building. What you're going to see is relevant not just to someone who's learning to echolocate, but really to any of us learning to do anything. So, visual cortex.
Sonar vision visual cortex.
A number of research projects have shown that people who are blind are in some ways redeploying the visual brain in such a way that they are truly seeing and appreciating the world around them, and that visual brain does light up, even though it's never received a visual input. So in many ways, this fantastic additional computing power of the brain, which is used for vision, is being redeployed as a way of seeing the world in the mind's eye.
Our version of echolocation, if you will, flash sonar, means that a flash of sound, in our case, a flash of energy, is used to solicit echoes from the environment that are then used for navigation.
More hedge, except it's really more like a tree hanging over the fence.
Active echolocation is a very specific form of self-directed and self-determined echolocation to optimize the quality of echoes from the environment, and it is very much under the control of the user.
One of the most important questions that we were interested in was what parts of Daniel's brain were activated when he was listening to the echoes coming back from his mouth clicks from the environment. We knew that blind people often use the visual part of their brain that's not being activated anymore by their eyes for other purposes, and we wondered whether or not this would be the case for echolocation as well. They produced the clicks, listened to the echoes, we recorded them, then we played those sounds back to them in a mixed up order to see whether or not they knew what they were, and they did. They were incredibly good at identifying them.
Daniel was able to correctly identify the scene 99% of the time. Brian, who'd been blind since the age of 14, had an 82% strike rate. Having proven that Daniel and Brian could effectively see the images in the recordings, the researchers then analysed their brain activity as they listened. Daniel's visual cortex lit up in response. Brian's was also active, although much less so.
It was interesting that the visual cortex was activated, but what was even more interesting was that when we compared sound files that contained clicks and echoes with sound files that contained only the clicks, that is, we chopped out the echoes and replaced it with background noise, then we found that the visual cortex was incredibly sensitive to the echoes.
Normal sounds didn't have the same increased effect on the visual system. It seems there was something special about the click and echo combination that was feeding the spatial information directly into an area of the visual system known as V1. For sighted people, V1 creates a spatial map that directly reflects the eye's retina.
Out here, there's a building that starts right about here, and it's further back.
That would help explain how Daniel can extract enough spatial information from the sound waves to identify large objects around him.
There's a gap between this tree and the car, and then this tree is kind of, in fact, I want to make it, it's almost on top of the car.
And create a 3D mental map of the scene, then sketch it from an aerial point of view.
I think echolocation is redefining our sense of what it means to be visual cortex. A better description might be spatial cortex, that is, cortex that's exquisitely tuned to the spatial layout of the world.
My visual cortex is responding the way a visual cortex does when presented with information from which it can extract an image. It's doing its job.
Okay, so my visual cortex is doing its job. I didn't introduce myself properly earlier. I am totally blind. I have no light perception. I have been totally blind without light perception since I was about a year old. I have no visual memories. Light to me is a concept, quite an interesting one, but certainly not something that I have any memory of ever having experienced. It seems to be pretty cool stuff, though. It's rather popular, you know, light. I want to give you a quick demonstration of echolocation. I'm going to try to do so. There's a lot of white noise in here, or brown noise, purple noise, whatever you call it. But just so you have an experience of what it is that we're talking about. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes for those whom it matters. And keep your eyes closed for a moment. And I'm going to make a sound, and I'm going to move this plate, this flat surface, toward me and away from me while I make that sound. And you'll hear the sound change dynamically as the plate approaches and recedes from my face. Okay, you can open your eyes. Do you all feel like you heard that? Like any kind of change that happened? On occasion, we get people who don't, and then if I have time, which I don't this morning, there are things that we can do to make you hear the change that we're talking about. But essentially, that's echolocation. It's determining distance between you and surfaces, but for dozens, if not hundreds of meters, okay? It actually can expand quite far into surrounding space. It can also determine, as Mr. Lochar talked about earlier, size, density, texture, shape, lots and lots and lots of different characteristics of objects. The next bit in the acronym is T for technology. I'm not going to talk much about technology because the rest of the day is about technology. Suffice it to say that there are tons and tons of current, existing, and emerging technologies that are completely revolutionizing the face of navigation and environmental interaction for, well, blind people and for us all. Support, S. Support is how we engage our support systems to do anything from, putting together these slides, as Kyle referenced, to climbing Mount Everest. Yes, there is a blind person who climbed Mount Everest, and he did it with a team. And he actually organized that team. He organized them, he led them, and he was integrated in the team, and they indeed succeeded in summiting Mount Everest. It also, though, has to do with not just how we engage supports, but how reciprocal we are in those support systems. It's very easy for a blind person to engage a village in order to facilitate functioning. But I'm of the believer that you don't get anything for free. It's kind of like drawing power from a power bank. The power bank eventually runs out of power unless you replenish the power. You have to give back into that structure. It's a kind of circular, iterative structure. It doesn't go one way. It doesn't work. So part of what I teach and part of what I study is that reciprocity of support. Okay, now, it's hugely important for us to understand how all of this sort of fits together in terms of self-determination. And what I've thrown at you are just lots of bits and elements and some demonstrations and examples. One of the biggest problems that we have is that as people who work with blind people, the blindness profession, the teachers, the instructors, we don't really understand self-determination. We don't really have a language to talk about self-determination, let alone teach or train people how to become more self-determined people. We also don't really understand perception. We don't understand, how the brain navigates. That in itself deserves a whole workshop. What I'd like to do, and what we have time for now, is to play one final video, which is called Take Charge. Take Charge short. It's a short version of our Take Charge video. But I called it Take Charge because of the way in which you'll see these blind students really taking charge of their activities. The way you see them taking charge, you'll see blind kids riding bicycles on their own. You'll see blind kids, running around in untracked space by themselves. You'll see a bunch of blind people doing a lot of different things by themselves or organizing their own activities. And I'm at the very end, you'll see one of our instructors who's going to be part of the panel setting a Guinness World Record by riding a bicycle through an obstacle course on a live stage that he had never seen before. So we'll wrap it up with that video.
A number of research projects have shown that people who are blind are in some ways redeploying the visual brain in such a way that they are truly seeing and appreciating the world around them, and that visual brain does light up.
Moved it.
I did, huh?
I can't understand how Daniel moves around so well and does things as if he had his sight. What I want the most is for Daniel to teach Kimberly to move around like he does.
Somewhere around you there's another pole, and if we listen, we might be able to find it. Awesome! Very nice!
Very nice. Track the boundaries of those houses. Good job.
I'm gonna come fast.
These skills are things that blind people don't typically have access to. And it's the most empowering feeling when you've got somebody who's with you and who is also blind and who's saying, yeah, you can do this, you can do this.
Go right, this way.
A lot of these kids are heavily supported, so they'll never really be stranded or high and dry. I mean, if you shut down your entire navigational system, someone's going to step in and navigate you. So we kind of undo all of that in our training, bit by bit, to reawaken and reactivate the navigational system. I worked with her for 7 days. She went from anxiety attacks about leaving her front door alone. By the end of those 7 days, it was getting to the mall on her own and enjoying doing her own shopping.
Oh, what is it? Let's go check it out.
Everybody has something to learn from echolocation, and that is that we all are capable of so much more than we previously thought. We are really living in a new era of exploring the question, what can blind people see? I mean, it's sort of a temporary state because now we can actually teach our brains to image acoustically. People often ask me, Brian, do you wish you could see? And my response is, I already can.
That's our hope for Hamoudi, is that he's going to, as an adult, he's just going to be able to just power through life like he does now, but basically without anybody helping him.
People get stereotypes from what they think. So what I do is I show people that they're wrong. And I do my normal stuff. And that has blown to pieces a bunch of stereotypes. I go out there and I run through them. So go with your heart, get out there, do something. Don't just sit there thinking you can't do anything, because you can.
You guys can see with your eyes, and we can see with our ears.
3, 2, 1, go! This obstacle course is not just holes, it is a goal. And the bigger the goal, the more obstacles you'll face. And on the other side of that goal is victory. Un Guinness World Record. Stop. E allora! È stato bellissimo vederlo qua. Si se puede! Si se puede! Si se puede! Yes, you can!
Thank you all for indulging us.